Oh, wow. Over 700 people. That's the biggest outreach we've ever run. 40, 50 volunteers who came to serve, all of us together as a church. You guys did a fantastic job. Katie just left one person out. Katie was the person who led all the leaders and all the teams. Would you give Katie a round of applause? She was amazing. She was amazing. Like, I don't know where she's going to sit, but carry her out on your shoulders as we go. And we're so glad that Rolling Smoke is back. We're going to have some barbecue together afterwards, and so it's going to be fun. Your kids are having a blast downstairs right now. They look awesome in their costumes. They're having an awesome time. Heritage Kids is such an awesome ministry to serve in, and they knew that today would be a great opportunity to one-up the other Sundays, and so they're having a blast downstairs. We're so glad that you're here today. All right, so true story. Christmas 1988. Roy, his name is Roy Collette. Roy looks out the window, and he knew he was in trouble when a flatbed truck pulled up to his house with a giant tank full of concrete, because he knew this was his Christmas present from his brother-in-law, Larry, and he knew that somewhere in all that concrete, there's a pair of pants. And if he doesn't fish it out of that concrete, he is going to have to declare himself the loser of a feud that had gone back and forth between Roy and Larry for over 20 years. You're craving some backdrop, aren't you? All right, let me give you some context. This goes all the way back to 1964. Larry gets a pair of moleskin pants from his mom. He ends up not liking them. He hangs on to them, and he wraps them up and re-gifts them to Roy the following Christmas. Roy doesn't like them, and he wraps them up, and the following Christmas after that, he gives them back. And it becomes a Christmas tradition where they keep giving each other these pants until one of them actually wound them really, really tight and stuffed them into a length of pipe so that the other guy would never be able to get them out. Problem is, he's got 364 days to figure out how to get him out of there. And so he does. And the war was on. More and more elaborate their gifting became. Then it was scrunched into a ball and completely surrounded in baling wire. Then after that, it was in a box of rocks in a wooden crate that was nailed shut and then had steel bands completely surrounding it. More and more and more. One year, the pants were in a 600-pound safe that was welded shut. I'm not kidding. This is serious. Another year, it was hidden in a giant concrete Rubik's Cube. I don't know where you get one of those. Weighed 4 tons, and then that was completely boxed in. Another year, the pants were inside a glove compartment of a 1974 AMC Gremlin that had been crushed into a cube. Almost 25 years it goes back and forth. You got to look it up if you want to know how it ends. But this is what I want to ask you. When you hear the back and forth nature of this kind of feud, and you think of the level of precision that each person is taking to make sure they don't lose, I just want to ask, does this remind you of any back and forth feuding that you have going on in a relationship in your life? There's a complete standoff, and both people know that it feels really good to win. And so this is what we're pursuing. If you're new to the room, you're joining a series that we're actually ending today, all throughout October. This series we've called The Ugly Truth has been a series devoted to talking about relationships, and literally the ugly truths of relationships, where our relationships end up being so fractured. If you look around you in the current climate, you know how such strong feelings we have. We have such strong opinions about life and justice and politics and culture. There's not much that you can't form an opinion on. And the question has been all throughout the month, can we have strong feelings about stuff in life and still have stronger relationships? Can we find a way to still maintain relationships throughout all of that? And so throughout the month, God's Word has been showing us the way. Today is going to be no different as we wrap up the series. And the question we want to ask today is a very simple one. Must our grudges end our relationships? Because that's usually the way it goes, right? Usually our grudges end our relationships. Is that the way that it has to be? The Bible is going to say no. But it's going to require something that if you've been here through October, you know that every week this piece keeps showing up, and it's this idea of grace. We're going to talk about forgiveness today. Forgiveness is one of the most underestimated skills of keeping relationships going. And so our goal today is we're going to talk exactly what forgiveness is and what it's not. We're probably going to definitely going to bust a few myths along the way. And the heart of this morning is that you're going to have a conversation that helps us become better forgivers, because we're people who actually want to see our relationships go further than our grudges, right? So probably the first thing that we could do to help is to kind of surround maybe the concept or the definition of forgiveness. Every time you have forgiveness, you have three pieces, and you actually can't have forgiveness unless you have all three. The first piece you need is what we are going to call the offense. The next piece that you need is the debt. And then finally, third and final, we're going to call this the release. So let's talk about the offense first. The offense is what somebody does to injure you or wound you. It's the experience that you endure when somebody else that you're in a relationship with doesn't have your best interests in mind. And it can look all kinds of ways. It's when we are offended. It's when we are hurt. Maybe it's because you've been betrayed. You've been stabbed in the back. Or maybe you've been falsely accused of something. They didn't know your true intentions. They misunderstood and they falsely accused you of something, or maybe they rejected you in some way. They left you out. Maybe they neglected you in a way, or they're even in places of humiliation or abuse. Could be emotional, could be physical. It could be as simple as feeling embarrassed when somebody belittled us in public or overlooked us or made us feel discarded. Now it's a good policy for us to have in relationships when we're hurt, when we're offended, to remember that it does take two to tango. And it's always good to step back and first ask ourselves this question. What did I do to contribute to this? Is there something that I've been allowing that has contributed to this? But we also need to say that sometimes an offense happens and it was not your fault. You did nothing to deserve the way you were spoken to, the way that you were treated. Every offense leads to debt. There are consequences to offenses. An offense costs something. Something might literally be bruised or broken, and it could be a broken weed whacker. It could be a scratched hot rod, if I had a nickel, right? Or, whatever it is. Oftentimes there is a noticeable debt that is incurred. Sometimes it's something that you can see and you can hold. Sometimes you just, by feeling, it's there. There's now a problem in the relationship. We've been calling it a relational fracture. And sometimes the other person in the relationship makes a withdrawal of trust that is more than the account actually had in it. This is where debt comes from. And it reminds me of a verse in Proverbs that I haven't come across it in a long time. I want to show it to you. It's in Proverbs 18. And because there's so many ways to experience debt, this is probably a way that captures the feeling of debt. Proverbs 18 says, an offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Just nod your head if you've experienced that before. An offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. This is what happens in life, what happens in relationships, is that when somebody writes a check against the relationship that the relationship can't cash, what happens? The bank closes. Things shut down. And things get really hard from this point forward. The writer of this verse, King Solomon, He's comparing your offended friend, your offended brother or sister to like a city. And a city has some kind of value in it, right? Or it wouldn't even be there. And no city worth its salt is going to just let anybody traipse on in there and take what they like. Walk in and take what's good. Come in and just hijack the city. In fact, we have a word for that, right? It's called an invasion. And cities don't do invasions, and that's what they do is they put their defenses up. They fortify the city because it's not okay for people to just walk in and take. It's a wise move to refuse to be violated again. That's why things shut down. Now think about your relationships. It's possible, right, that this could explain why somebody you've offended has been behaving the weird way that they've been behaving towards you, right? Or because that's just the feeling. Or maybe it might explain the difficulty you've had earning the trust of somebody in your life. You haven't offended them, but they are wounded and they are embittered. And so far, it just feels like no matter what I try, I can't seem to break in because that's exactly what you're trying to do. And they're not having it. They have maybe come to a point in their life that they just can't trust other people to value them properly. And so they have gone on lockdown. Or maybe is this you? I mean, is it possible that there's at least one relationship in your life where you have an arms folded posture because of what has gone down in the relationship? And you're thinking, I can keep these arms folded forever. And a good question to ask this morning is, can you? Like if a bank, which should shut down sometimes, like if it never reopens, is it still a bank? How's it going to go for a city that never opens the gates again? I heard a saying once, a ship is always going to be safe in its own harbor. But that is not what ships were made for. This is the feeling of when debt has been created in a relationship. And interestingly enough, the proverb continues. Solomon writes, an offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. Now, if you squint at this, you realize that gates aren't walls, right? That's the point of a gate. It's meant to open and close. But as long as we keep, this is very specific to some relationships in this room right now, as long as we keep the argument alive, it acts as a padlock on the gate. More and more and more padlocks. It could open up. Gates do open. We could do business again. But as long as the argument is alive, as long as we keep breathing life and emotion into the standoff, the gate stays locked. Offense, it happens. If you're going to live in life, you're going to get offended. You're going to create offense. Offense always leads to debt. And the piece we have here is this piece called release. And this is a very important piece to understand because at the heart of forgiveness is release. It's the essence of forgiveness. I would casually define forgiveness as the act of releasing someone from an obligation to you. That's the essence of forgiveness. I said we're going to bust up a few myths today. So here's a myth about forgiveness. It goes like this. Forgiveness means I do something. You know, it took me a long time in my life to understand that is fake news. Forgiveness means I do something. We're all going to agree that forgiving people is hard. But sometimes we build up in our mind that forgiveness is this religious, spiritual thing that only virtuous people can do. And we say to ourselves, I'm not that strong, I'm not that good. And we treat forgiveness like this, 600-pound deadlift. And I'm like, I can't, I got to work up to it. And I forgive you. It's like this thing that we create, And I got to tell you something about forgiveness. You got it all wrong if that's your thought. Forgiveness is not about something that I do. It's about something I stop doing. This is not a deadlift. This is not a spiritual bench press. This is not I'm going to carry this up a hill for the rest of my life. This is a let go. It's a release. I'll give you an illustration. This is at my house, all right? This comes from the shower. It was Pantene shampoo. Daily moisture renewal. Yeah, it's commercial. Yeah, I'm getting zero kickback on this. If you go to any one of our houses and you see this sitting on a sink or a bathtub, what do you think to yourself? You know, oh, these people occasionally wash their hair. But, and I know I'm talking to some dads in the room right now, you walk into any bathroom in America and you see one of these shampoo bottles and then a second one exactly like it upside down on the top of it. What's happening now? Oh, somebody's going to make sure that they're not wasting shampoo from the last bottle and it is draining into this bottle. And I know this is a dad move. At least it's true at my house where I'm like, oh, I paid for that shampoo and it's going to go in somebody's hair. And so you turn it upside down and you balance it and you have to, and you don't want it, they knock over easily. So you have to walk around this thing, but you're going to give it time. You're going to give it time. You're going to get every last drop. And if you've never tried this, you'll be a millionaire just like me. It works in the bathroom, shampoo bottles. You go down to the kitchen, you see ketchup bottles on top of each other. I'll wait. It's good. You go in the garage, WD-40, boop, here's the deal. I'm gonna get all the value. I'll just do whatever it takes. I'll be as careful as I have to do. I'll wait as long as I need to. And this has been one of the hardest things for me to understand about forgiveness. For me, it's knowing that there's debt, there's value that I am choosing not to collect on. That is what forgiveness means, is that you know there's something there, and you're making a choice. I'm not going to get all the mileage out of this. And that's what stops us from chucking it, right? It's like, I don't know if it's your shampoo. I don't know if it's your toothpaste, but I know that you can relate. You've got value there. You're not willing to let it go. Forgiveness is not something that you do. It's something that you stop doing. It's when you decide, I'm going to stop fiddling around with that. It's almost like you as the CEO of your life, you call a boardroom meeting with your head and your heart and your hands and your dreams and your passions and your wallet and your schedule. And you say, folks, I run this company, and I'm just telling you right now, this one, we are crossing this off the books. We have decided it is not in the best interest of this company to collect on this debt. We are not to spend another minute pursuing the value here. It's done. It's a dead pursuit. We're moving on. And this is how it goes in our relationships. As long as you stay stuck on the debt, as long as you focus on the fracture, you will never forgive. You'll keep stewing on what they said. You'll keep stewing on what they did. It's not going to happen. And time will just stop in that relationship while you just wait for the next drop to make it worth it for you. You will never move on. And the big question we want to answer today is, so how do you do it? How do I become a more light-footed forgiver? Right? Just move through it. How do I do that? It has everything to do with not focusing on the past and on the offense and on the debt. So what do you focus on? This is kind of the main outline for the morning, right? I want to give you 4 things that you focus on in order to forgive. The first one is their value. Not the value of what was done to you, but their value, the value of the other person. I would take you to a passage in Luke 15. Dare I say it's one of the favorite passages of our church. It takes us to a time when Jesus was sharing some stories. He was teaching a crowd, polarized crowd. There was the religious hoity-toity elite were there. Love to look down their noses on lesser thans like me. And then there was the bedraggled of society who would kind of come hang out with Jesus with their tail between their legs. And Jesus is sharing a story. And this is big. He's telling them what the heart of God is like. And he gives them this triple metaphor that focuses on the heart of God And this phrase that just keeps coming up, the one. The one. He tells him, the heart of God is like this. He's like a shepherd who's got 100 sheep doing what they're supposed to do, and one dummy sheep wanders off where he's all alone, doesn't have a shepherd, doesn't have the pack, doesn't know what's out there. The heart of God is the shepherd who leaves the 99 to go pursue the one and brave the journey in order to bring that sheep back home. Why? Value. He sees it. And then Jesus immediately says, the heart of God, the love of God is like a woman who's got limited resources, a 10 silver coin stash, and she loses one of them. That woman is going to look high and low through the night, and she'll pull that house apart brick by brick before she forgets that coin because it's hers and she wants it back. It's got value. And then Jesus jumps right into a third wave, and he says that the heart of God is like a daddy who's got 2 beloved sons, and were one of them to become a prodigal son and shake himself free from his dad's authority and skip town and take with him all of dad's resources and then foolishly just squander all those resources in stupid living until he is in abject poverty and he's far from home and he has no one. And then he finally wakes up to everything that's gone down, and he makes a speech that I'm going to go all the way back home, and maybe my pops will hire me back as a farmhand, because sure enough, he's not going to take me back as his son. And Jesus says the heart of God is like the father who has been watching for his son's return, has never given up, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming, and filled with love and compassion, he books it, and he runs to his son, and he embraces him, and he kisses him, and his son starts going into the speech, and his dad is shouting over his shoulder, and he tells his servants, hey, bring the best robe we've got, bring the family ring for his finger, sandals for his feet. You look a mess. You need to get back to your family, and we got a party tonight with a feast, because this son of mine was lost. He was the one that was lost, and now he's found. Value. And it helps us in these moments when our relationships break down to close our eyes and see what God sees. And that might even be a little hard for you to hear right now, but let God whisper in your ear, hey, you think you're looking at an unforgivable person? I don't. There's eternal value. I handcrafted that person. And I know it's been rough, and I know it's been hard, and I know it's bad right now. But this is a person that I'll keep pursuing until they're home. It's crazy, right? Something we can keep in mind. Makes us a better forgiver to remember, 1, their value. Here's the second one. There's 4 of these. 1, their value. 2, my fallenness. See, forgiveness becomes easier when we recall that I've been the wayward sheep. I have been that coin that just rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled until it found a place between the floorboards and all the way down into the cellar, and it just kind of got to a place where nobody would ever finally. I have been that punk kid that thought he knew everything and actually had no clue what he was asking for. I wonder if you feel that way about yourself. Would you say, yeah, many times in life, I was so convinced that my bad logic was just great. And I abandoned reason, and I cheated on my own. I took shortcuts through my own moral standards, and I stiff-armed really good people. And I ended up in a hole that I could not get out of by myself. I've been that way. This is a major newsflash from the Bible. Romans 3 says that all have sinned and we all fall short of God's glorious standard. All. See, the only measure of rightness that really matters in this life, I know it's fun to be right. I know it feels good to be right. And it's a good thing. But the only measure of rightness that matters in this life is the kind of rightness that can get you to the next life. Heaven, God's rule and reign, never night, no tears, no sickness, nor death, the way it was supposed to be before sin screwed stuff up. God's inviting us to come home to him like forever. But that's kind of a jump, right? Like if God is standing on the north rim of the Grand Canyon in all of his perfection and his beauty and his holiness, and everything clicks and everything's right, and like it's beautiful and it's pure and it's the best. That's where our heart is telling us to go. But you and I are all standing on the south rim. And we got to make the jump. And if we all go 1, 2, 3, I bet I make it further into the chasm than some of you. But I bet there's some of you here that make it further than me. And I know this, that none of us are making it across. Gap is too big. That's what the Bible means when it says we all fall short. That's what we should be picturing when we see that verse, that God has a glorious standard. And none of us make it across. We all get an F in our own ability to get over to a perfect God. And so when it comes to forgiving, we're not usually thinking about that, are we? When it comes to forgiving, we're usually so fired up about being right. We're so fired up about how we were hurt that we don't really leave any space for like humility and understanding. And this is why the Bible wants to help us shift our focus. It's in verses like these. Ephesians 4 says, hey, instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. It's pretty hard for me to be tenderhearted to somebody that I haven't forgiven yet, right? But that's where he's leading us. In Colossians 3, he says, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. You're starting to see a theme here. This kind of leadership makes the most to anybody who has already decided, I need to be forgiven from God. I need to believe for myself that God is that dad who's been pursuing me. And part of his, the climax of his all-in pursuit of me led to him sending his own perfect son, Jesus, down to earth to live a perfect life, get the A that I couldn't get, and then be mercilessly pummeled and crushed by sinful humanity for sin, all of sin, your sin, my sin, so that our sin bill could one day be completely covered. That is the basis of forgiveness that God is offering us, so that we can have a restored relationship with God. God sees the offense. God sees the debt. And on the basis of releasing it, he sent us Jesus. And the great wisdom of the Bible is this. You see it show up twice in both of those verses. Nobody's ever going to owe you as much as you owe God. And if he forgives you and he's giving you his grace, then you're rich. You got grace to burn. You can let this go. You don't have to keep chasing it. I know that doesn't minimize the pain. I know it doesn't not supposed to erase the memory of what's been done to you, but at the heart of it, forgiven people forgive. So this is what we focus on if we want to become a better forgiver. Their value, my fallenness. Here's the third one. Our future. Our future. Just like you, I have grudges. Just like you, I have disagreements. With my wife, yes. With my boss, yes. With my colleagues, yes. With many of you, yes. Am I always right in those disagreements? No. Don't look so surprised. Sometimes I'm right. A lot of times I'm wrong. Lots of times I'm wrong in the way that I'm right. But look, never all the time. And a question that I have had to learn to ask is a question that all of us have to ask. It's this: right or wrong, did you want to see this thing become the end of us? Is it worth it? Focus on our future. It reminds me of a little church fallout that was recorded in the Bible back in the day. You find this verse pop up in the book of 1 Corinthians, which is really more like a letter. It's written by the Apostle Paul, and he's writing this little church in the city of Corinth. And he's basically like, hey, so we need to talk about this one dude that I've heard about who's in your congregation, and he's a follower of Christ like the rest of you guys, but he is sinning so ridiculously and sinning so like publicly and brazenly, and you guys are not responding to this well. You guys are so proud of your tolerance of this guy. What you ought to be doing is drawing a line and then calling him out and cut him off, like for his own sake, so that he can understand how truly lost he is behaving. And apparently that little church in Corinth listened. They were wise, because Paul writes another letter. It's also in your Bible. It's called 2 Corinthians, and this is where Paul says, okay. I'm not overstating it when I say that the man who caused all the trouble hurt all of you more than he hurt me. I was the one with the strong language for your sake, but I know how much he was hurting the church. He was hurting your relationships. Most of you opposed him, and that was punishment enough. And now, however, it is time to forgive and comfort him. Read this. Otherwise, he may become overcome by discouragement. That's something we have to care about. So I urge you now to reaffirm your love for him. Paul's like, I think you got the memo. His behavior has changed. And listen, the hurts of the past have hurt us enough. But these relationships are going to continue to hurt if you and I don't make a change. There's a lot of times where if we just back up and focus on the outcome, we can ask ourselves this question: do I want this marriage to stop on this? Or do we want to be married for a few more years or a few more decades? Do I want to be able to smile at her when I see her at work or I see her at Aldi? What do I want that to feel like? Do I want to be apprehensive at the future weddings and at the future Thanksgiving tables and the things like that? We focus a little more about the future and how we want this to end up for us. And there's in that verse that we just read, I think there's a really nice tip there where he says, reaffirm your love for him. I think that there are times, maybe even right now, there's a relationship where there's a standoff and you do not agree and it doesn't look like you don't agree, but it doesn't look like it's going to clear up. You know, in the midst of that, you can still reaffirm your love for that person. You could say, man, I know we don't see eye to eye to this, but I have so much respect for you. I just wanted you to hear me say that. I love you. I want to be friends for a really long time. I think this is small and our relationship is big. I think we can have strong feelings and stronger relationships. That's the hope of forgiveness. It focuses on their value, my fallenness, our future. And here's one more to focus on, and I think this is going to help too. My future. It's sad to say, but not every relationship is going to make it through a fracture stronger than it was before the break. You know this, but biologically, this is what doctors will tell you, that if you set the fracture, if you give it the time to heal, it actually is a stronger bone later because of the bridging that happens at the break. That's the goal for all relationships, and you might have experienced that too. Man, we're better off than we were before because we got honest. We looked at each other's eyes. We shed some tears. We figured things out. We embraced, and then we threw it away, and we decided to move forward. That was the win. But unfortunately, we know that it doesn't always work that way. We don't always have two people who are willing to do that. So what do you do in a situation like that? Are you stuck not forgiving? I would give you a line from Romans. It says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. This may not be the storybook ending that we wanted. Maybe not yet. But if we can't get to a place where two people are going to protect our future, you're within your ability to at least protect what you would call my future. Here's another myth that it helps to really move away from. It's this idea that forgiveness equals trust. Sometimes we have this idea that when something goes south in a relationship and trust is lost and we forgive, then the next thing that's supposed to happen is that everything just goes back to the way it was before. That's not true. Forgiveness does not equal trust. If we go back to the thinking like a banker, don't you think it's totally possible to cancel a debt but still not go back to doing business with that person? Trust is the equity of relationships. It is the currency of relationships. And sometimes it's a better thing that the relationship doesn't go back to the way it was before. Now listen, not out of spite, not because you're mad, not because you're trying to weaponize your pain against your offender, but simply out of wisdom. You're going to say, look, I don't know what kind of future we have, but I'm going to tell you what my future is going to be, is that I'm going to live at peace with people as far as it depends on me. Whatever is possible, I'm going to do it. I'm going to release it. And I'm not going to keep drinking the poison of unforgiveness expecting the other person to keel over. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't have to go back to the same trust levels for you to release and forgive. Here's another myth. You might have said this in the past. I can't forgive that person because they're not sorry yet. I'm waiting for them to apologize to me. That's a myth. You don't have to wait for them to be sorry for you to forgive. You just what? You let it go. They may not get it yet. They might see it yet. Now, I want to chase this just a little bit further, okay? You might be asking right now, okay, then why do we even apologize to each other? If people are just supposed to forgive without an I'm sorry, then why do we go through all the gymnastics of like having a sincere apology? I'll tell you why. Because when it's your time to apologize, you're making it so much easier for them to do their job. Until that happens, the person who's been offended is like, all right, I don't know how I can do a relationship like this. Either you're crazy or I am, but we are not on the same page. When somebody apologizes, when they confess their sin, this is calling a meeting and getting on the same page and say, look, you're not crazy. You said I was wrong. I say I was wrong. And what happens in that moment is now we can do business again. Now it's like, you can move past that and something magical happens. This is why we got to get good at apologies and being humble and sincere in them, is because I'm so eager to think about their value in a moment like that and how I can totally relate in my fallenness, how I have been where they are before, and I really hope they forgive me, and we can think about our future again. Like, it all comes back in when somebody apologizes. But an apology is not required for you to release them. Jesus said this once. He said, when you're praying, first forgive anyone you're holding a grudge against so that your Father in heaven will forgive your sins too. And if you're anything like me, then I would bet that some of us right now are still trying to move forward with a clean conscience before God while we keep somebody in jail in our heads. And what Jesus is trying to tell us is that God is like, this is going to be a relational holdup between you and me. If you're looking for me to lead you and free you and lead you into blessing and freedom and joy, you got to understand my grace to you, and you don't. If you don't understand the need that other people have for grace from you. And I would be willing to imagine that you're like, but it hurts so much. This is so hard. Like, uncurling my fingers from this, it's been years. God, do you know how hard is this? God would be like, yeah, I do. Let me give you a picture. It's a picture of Jesus, and he's hanging on a cross. He's the perfect Lamb of God, and he is bleeding out before the eyes of humanity. He's been betrayed. He's been humiliated. He's falsely accused. He's rejected and abused. All of it. And he cries out a prayer that everybody hears, and it goes like this: Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. You see that? And that's a choice we get to make as we follow Jesus, is to be like that, to say, Jesus, you're my hero. Help me to forgive people before they ask for it. Help me to let it go quick. I don't want to keep waiting for the next trip. I don't want to carry this through my whole life. And so I just want to pray for that right now. I'm closing my Bible and we're wrapping this up. And in a moment, our team is going to lead us in a final song of worship that I think will really help cement this in our hearts. But with your eyes closed, your heads bowed, I'd like to ask you something. Really, two things. One, is there any chance that today's the day, and that God has used his word and like his spirit in this room and in your life to bring some things to the surface? And between you and God right now, you're realizing something. I have got to start letting this go. If I can include another myth right now, I just tell you, there are some debts that I have had to let go of again and again and again and again and again. It just like keeps ending up in my hands, and I have to keep releasing it. It's a conscious effort to tell the boardroom, not doing it, not pursuing it. I'm not going that route. God, help me to let this go. Could today be that day for you? I want to pray for us right now. To do, I think the truth of what you're about to do before God, to just release somebody from how they've hurt you so that the relationship can get some new breath. I have a feeling you've already made that decision in your heart. Can I join you in that? Our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed, but I want to encourage you, if you've got something, anything that you're like, I'm walking out of here a little lighter, I got something I want to let go of. Would you just put your hand in the air right now? Yep. I see it. Yep. Holy cow, yeah, let me just receive this. We're praying for each other. Father, we're asking for the ability that Jesus has, those abilities to come alive inside of us. Help us to release other people from how they have hurt us and wounded us. Father, we're going to leave whatever they should pay, whatever they owe to you. Put you in charge of this debt. We can't carry this. You can. And we're so grateful for how Jesus paid for us. We're ready to essentially cover somebody else's bill. We're going to throw it away. Father, I pray that we would find it easier, lighter to follow you. But I believe this is only by your Spirit that this is possible. Father, I receive your activity in my life to become a more empty-handed, ready to move forward person. Let me ask one more question for everybody here. My heart praises God for the decisions that are being made today. And could I ask, is it possible that as I describe a relationship with God today, that where you are today, as you're realizing that I feel like that chasm is still between me and God. And I do want to be with God. I want to be his son, daughter. I want to be in his family. I want to know that we can be close. What you're hearing today is that Jesus came to make that possible. Our sin will always keep us out of perfect, holy, amazing circles. And Jesus came to cover that debt with his own perfect life. And that is a gift to you. You can't make this stuff up. This is not my stuff. This is all in the Word of God. You can be forgiven because of what Jesus has done for you. And the choice is yours, that after the end of your life, you can face God and defend your own ability to be right and perfect all the time, or just say, I'm in your family because Jesus took my sin and wore it as his, and I have on me his righteousness. I have his A+. Is that something you have ever taken a moment to tell God, I want that? Are you ready to tell him that right now? Heads are bowed, eyes are closed. Why don't you just make it an active part of this step? Just slip your hand up in the air and use these words. Pray these words in your heart. God, I admit I need your forgiveness. I have sinned. I have screwed up. I've made mistakes. I don't want that to stand between us anymore. And I want to receive the forgiveness. I'm so grateful you're releasing me from anything that could ever keep us apart. Thank you for your love through Jesus. I'm putting my trust in him, not my trust in me. And I receive a free gift of eternal life through your son, Jesus. It's in your name I pray. Amen. There's some incredible decisions that have been made and are being made in this room. I want to encourage you to just kind of keep a prayer postures. Joel and the team sing an amazing song about grace and how God's arms will always be open wide. To anybody who's ready to be forgiven, it's all because of Jesus.